Coming to you live from the Mistopheles Studios, it's Dark Fringe Radio. And welcome to Dark Fringe Radio. I am your host, Will Martinez, and we got a great show for you guys tonight. Episode number 52. And it's going to be a very interesting episode because it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to get into that here tonight. And, of course, my co-host, my partner in crime, as always, Jay Galosi. Jay, what's going on, brother?
What's up, motherfucker?
Yeah, man.
How are you doing, man?
We're doing great, man. We're doing great. We're going to have a great episode tonight for everybody. We got something special planned, some new segments, so some new material for everybody tonight. So we hope to bring everybody a little bit more extra meat on the bone tonight. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. A little extra meat, some nice garnish of potatoes. Dude, we got some good stuff. I'm really excited for this episode. I'm looking forward to not only the main topic, but a few of our current running segments and a new running segment, which will you guys will hear here in a little bit.
Exactly. And again, I wanted to remind everybody about the social media, how to follow us. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just look up Dark Fringe Radio. We're there on a daily basis. We're always dropping new stuff on there. So make sure you follow us on those fronts and check us out. How to listen to the podcast, very simple. You can listen to us pretty much on every freaking platform they have out there right now. So whether it's Stitcher, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, you name it, we're out there. Just look up Dark Fringe Radio. We just ask you one favor when you do that. Make sure that you give us a 5-star rating and a comment. So that way that helps us out with the advertisers and gives us a little bit of a little boost in the rating. So that's the way you can help us out. Make sure you do that. Make sure to do that on every one of those platforms. If you do listen on different types of platforms, please just do that in all of them that you can. So that's it. How to listen to the podcast and how to follow us on the social media. Jay, anything else for the intro?
That's it for the intro. Make sure you like, comment, share, star, give us your information, good, bad, indifferent, and or ugly. We do not care. We want to hear it from everyone. So that way we can make sure that we bring you guys the best possible content for you guys to listen to and wrap your minds around.
Absolutely. And again, if anybody has anything that they want to send to us, as far as information, guest suggestions, anything like that to that nature, you can send that to us directly at thedarkfringe@gmail.com. Again, it's thedarkfringe@gmail.com. We're always looking to, interview interesting guests, anybody who has anything that has, anything pertaining to the paranormal, anything at all, conspiracy theories, climate change, whatever you could possibly think of that's obscure and things that, most people don't talk about. We will definitely entertain it. It's definitely up our alley. So make sure you send that stuff to us directly, again, at thedarkfringe@gmail.com. All right, that's the intro for tonight. Jay, you want to jump into the mailbag?
Again, like I said last week, I don't like that as a dirty euphemism. I'm not jumping into any mail bag. But as far as content for people with questions from our great listeners, I absolutely do.
I was trying fruit on.
All right, man. Well, that makes perfect sense, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Our first mailbag question comes from a David Gomez from Scottsdale, Arizona. David writes, "Hi, guys. David from Scottsdale here, and I was just wondering if either of you have heard anything about the Julian Assange issue where he got picked up in the UK. Did you hear about that, Jay?"
I didn't.
Yeah, so the guy who's behind WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, has been held up in an Ecuadorian, I guess what they call, I forget the name actually, where a political asylum area where, like a parliament for the Ecuadorians. Anyway, so they gave him political asylum or somewhat of some kind of asylum there where he was just chilling there. And nobody can kind of like touch him. But again, he wouldn't adhere to the rules of, what they put forth for him. So next thing you know, here comes the UK Parliament and they come in and just swoop him up from this, this apartment building that he was at. And, it's a pretty interesting story because, this guy was responsible for all the WikiLeaks dumps. He was responsible for the Panama Papers, which was, all these information dumps of, people doing pretty nefarious things. People, hiding money overseas and, it was pretty damning. So again, this guy's been responsible for really disseminating a lot of information that a lot of people have not been able to get their hands on, and who knows what kind of ways he's gotten his hands on this information. And that's kind of the reason why they've taken into custody now, because they say that he's hacked into computers and it's some type of hacking job. So that's the kind of technicality that they got him on. But yeah, that's what's pretty much going on in the UK right now, Jay.
It's the technicalities that will get you. I mean, Al Capone got nailed for tax evasion, and as we get into the meat and story of our stories, the particular one I'm focusing on, it was a little things to get you in trouble. It's those T's that don't get crossed, those I's that don't get dotted. So something so simple and little as hacking someone's computer, could get you in some deep shit when you've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story, and it's going to be interesting how it develops as time goes by, and see if he does get extradited to the United States. That's what the U.S. wants, because they want to get him on that, those issues. But again, I mean, some people call him a journalist, some people call him, a traitor, because of what he did, and disseminating a lot of that information. I mean, yeah, it did show a lot of issues with the people behind the scenes, but again, to what cost? You know what I mean? So again, I could see the argument on both sides.
Right. Well, and that's with everything else you do. You have to outweigh the cost versus the outcome. Like, is it really worth it? While yes, you're getting information out and you're shedding the light on those who are doing nefarious and questionable actions, if you yourself are partaking in said questionable and nefarious actions, it kind of tends to become a moot point. It's the kettle calling the pot black.
Exactly. Ooh. Yeah, you're on the money there, man. You're right. It's a tongue twister. Oh, but you're right.
At this time of night, after a very long day, yes, apparently that is a tongue twister.
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. We understand. And listen, you're precisely on point. I mean, that's just the way it is. But again, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see where this all goes and how it unfolds, or maybe this guy ends up suiciding himself, somehow, some way.
Wink, nudge,
wink.
Nudge.
Exactly. I wasn't trying to, make it obvious, but yeah, obvious. But yeah, it was. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see. But David Gomez, thanks from Scottsdale, Arizona, man. Thanks for sending that in, and we appreciate the question for the mailbag. Another mailbag question we have from a Jamie Duggar, and she is from Pleasant Point, Montana, and we appreciate the email. Thank you so much. And she asks, are you guys going to do any movie reviews, especially the new one with Pet Sematary being remade, and also the new sequel from Rob Zombie 3 from Hell? She's she also goes on to say that she really misses the movie reviews and wish that we would do a little bit more, or maybe even do them live. That's a good suggestion. Maybe we'll do something like that. Yeah, listen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Listen, we did that for a while. We had a person on here who did that for us for a while, and it was great for a minute, but then it kind of wore thin after a while. So it's unfortunately we just decided not to do it, because we wanted to do other segments that we thought were a little bit more fruitful for us. But if you guys are really interested in that, what we'll do, maybe Jay, is take a poll, maybe online. Maybe that'll be a good way to get a gauge on something like this.
Let's do that, because my what to watch is actually something I could review, because it's something I saw in the movies. Now, it's not quite on the same tones as the Pet Sematary or Rob Zombie's movies.
Right.
I'll go ahead and leave that more to you. Although I've heard some stuff about the Pet Sematary movie, the new one.
Yeah.
That I'll leave out there, because I haven't seen it, so I can't give my opinion or 2 cents. But there's a lot of big movies coming out, and I have to plan a lot of trips to the movie theater. So we could definitely do that, or cover some different movies and reviews. Maybe add it as a segment, maybe once a month or something like that, and we can take that poll online and see what everybody else thinks. If they want it, if that's what the people want, that's what they get. If they want cake, Let them eat cake.
Let them eat cake. Yeah. Well,
Or
listen.
get movie reviews, yeah.
Well, you know what? That's what we'll do. Listen, everybody, follow us on Instagram. Look up Dark Fringe Radio on Instagram. What we'll do is by the time this episode comes out, there's going to be a poll on there for you guys to basically tell us whether or not you want us to do a movie review, and we could do it live as well. Something that we could do, maybe Instagram Live or Facebook Live, whatever the case may be. Maybe we could just do it something separate from the podcast and maybe add a little bit more entertainment somewhere else. So we'll check that out. We'll do that, and just make sure you follow us there on Instagram. Check out the poll. We'll leave it up there for a few days for everybody to gather the time to go ahead and do that. But we'll leave it up there. Give us your opinion, and we'll go from there. So again, thanks so much, Mrs. Duggar, and from Pleasant Point, Montana, and thanks for sending in the mailbag question. So again, that's it for the mailbag, Jay. Anything else for the mailbag you want to add to any of those two topics there?
No, I think those are great suggestions on ways that we can continue to evolve the podcast as far as Miss is it Duggar, right?
Yes, Miss
Duggar.
Yeah, Jamie Duggar from Pleasant Point.
From Pleasant Point, Montana. I had one of my brothers used to be stationed out in Montana.
Really?
Either way, totally aside the point. Yeah, my brother Bob.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Either way, so that's a great way for us to evolve. Maybe not even something with the podcast, but do something additional on the side. I mean, Will and I, we talk about these things constantly, and we've talked about doing more live episodes. So if maybe that'll be separate from the podcast. It can just be a live episode, something we do, every now and then, or when as it gains momentum and interest, it can be something else that we can add on to all the content that we put out, as well as I'll be curious to see what happens with the whole WikiLeaks thing and see how that progresses on if the U.S. gets their hands on him, on if he stays in the U.K. for prosecution, if he gets prosecuted to prosecution at all. Some unfortunate event might happen. You never know.
Yeah, that's what everybody's saying that might happen, but we'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting event. So, well, listen, that concludes the mailbag for this episode, and I appreciate, Jay, your feedback as well. Thanks, guys, for sending in those questions, and please, again, if any of you guys have any other questions, suggestions for the show, again, send that to us to thedarkfringe@gmail.com. Again, thedarkfringe@gmail.com. Send that to us. We respond right away. And yeah, that's it. That concludes the mailbag.
Hey, this is Marie D. Jones, best-selling author and paranormal researcher, and you are listening to Dark Fringe Radio.
Jay, go ahead and we spoke about this new segment, and I wanted to kind of bring this in, and I wanted you to kind of introduce it to the listeners, and kind of introduce it and talk about it and explain what we're going to do here tonight.
All right, friends, Romans, neighbors, countrymen, fellow Dark Fringers. As I was driving along yesterday, I thought to myself, what's some new things that we could do on the podcast? I find myself trying to think of new things and trying to go ahead and let my creative horses run free from time to time. And Will is truly the anchor in which holds this thing together and the motor in which drives us. But sometimes I get to have a little bit of fun and throw a little few things out. So I figured, nice little fun play on words for the name, my friend Will. My friend Will is a very smart guy, knows a lot of things about a lot of things. He's also a really good bullshit artist. So in our newest segment, yeah, I got you, motherfucker. So in our newest segment, I'm so glad that we've come off that whole family show thing we were trying to do.
I know, right?
The new segment is called Just Not Us. Will You Tell Me?
Will You Tell Me?
Every week, every podcast, every episode, I'm going to come up with a new question. The question is going to range from everywhere and anywhere. Anything in which I think I can trip up or slip up my good man Will. And he will tell me whether he knows something or not. By or not, I mean he's going to try to bullshit his way through. And I have to try to figure out if he knows what he's talking about or if he's blowing smoke up my butthole, which I don't like, Will, so don't do it.
No,
But
of
that's
course.
the newest segment.
Yeah, and I have to cop up to it. Either I'm telling the truth or I'm bullshitting. So it takes a lot of truth and effort on my part too to be honest about it. And that's what we're gonna do here tonight. And I thought it was a great idea by Jay to come up with this idea for our new segment. And we're gonna go ahead with tonight. Will you tell me? So let's start it off, Jay. Come on, let's. What's the question for tonight? And by the way, I can't look up anything. I can't use any electronic devices. I'm not searching or anything. I am completely still with a microphone in my face and just thinking about what the answer may be. Go ahead.
With this being the inaugural Will You Tell Me, the initial one, and us being in Florida, both Florida-based Florida boys, born and raised and grown in Florida,
Hallelujah.
I figured I would do something very Florida.
Okay.
So my question, Will, is, will you tell me how Florida became part of the United States?
Florida became part of the United States back, I believe, in the 1800s, the late 1800s. It actually started with St. Augustine, and St. Augustine is actually the oldest city in the U.S. A lot of people don't know that. So it actually started there, and then what happened is that I think it was one of the generals. I think it was I can't remember if it was the Stanley. I don't know if it was the General Stanley. One of the two. The one that came down here that actually has the mansion that we've gone to field trips before many times as children, that built the railroads down here, and that's what basically started the influx of people coming down here and this becoming part of the Union. So that's what I believe. That was the answer to that question.
Yeah. Are you making that up, or are you being honest?
You have to ask. You have to tell me. What do you think?
In the early 1800s, right about as early as 1818, the Florida Seminoles were actually going through into Georgia and raiding white settlements on behalf of British privateers. So the president at the time, who was James Monroe, sent down his most trusted general, who was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson went onto Spanish territory, which was Florida. He hung every British privateer. So he caused a three-way international incident. And everybody has to remember, at the time, in the early 1800s, we were not an international powerhouse. We had actually just had our asses handed to us by the British in the War of 1812. We were really not focused on going out and above to become anything more than what we were. We were only focused on our own shores. So the actions that happened in Florida by Andrew Jackson is what caused America to start realizing that it could no longer be a closed border kind of country.
Right.
So Andrew Jackson comes in, he hangs these British privateers, pissing off the British and the Spanish because he did on their land. And the Speaker of the House, Henry Clay, had actually wanted Jackson to be severely reprimanded, including up to prison time. And James Monroe said, no, what he did was a military foray. He did a preemptive strike, which is what he should have done, and he hung the pirates, which is also what he ought to have done. So James Monroe opened negotiations with Spain and ended up getting Spain to cede Florida in 1822, I want to believe it. I want to say it was 1820, 1822, somewhere in there, without another shot fired or a dime being spent. The Spanish were so done with Florida that they just gave it away. So no, Will, you are wrong.
Exactly. I try to bullshit my way through that.
You thought it was Henry Flagler, for fuck's sake.
Flagler, exactly. I was trying to add, the name was right there. I just couldn't get it.
Yeah, Flagler was an industrialist. He didn't have shit to do with a general.
Yeah, it sounded good though.
Yeah, no, your smoke blowing was.
It was about halfway. It was about halfway. I could do better. Yeah, next time.
I know you knew better. It was the inaugural one. I got faith in you for the next one. I already have plans for the next 4 or 5 of these. It's going to be.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. That's awesome. I love it. Well, that's great, man. I love the segment. We'll keep it up, man, here for next week. So tonight, Jay, what we're going to do is do something a little different, a little off the beaten path. Me and Jay were kicking around ideas about, what we should do for the podcast tonight. So we decided, you know what, we're going to go a little different tonight. We're going to do some true crime, and we're going to talk about a couple different cases that we thought that the question still remains. There's some type of mystery behind it, and we're gonna kind of pick apart a couple cases here that we think are pretty intriguing. We think we should talk about and discuss. So, Jay, tonight, what is your true crime story that we're going to talk about and disseminate?
So I was focusing on Jimmy Hoffa.
Ah.
So Jimmy Hoffa, I didn't have a whole lot of idea who he was before I started doing the research for this episode. I knew some things. I knew that he was a Teamster. I knew that he vanished one day.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that he could be a scary individual, but I didn't really know much else beyond that. So I found Jimmy Hoffa to be a very complex individual. And honestly, I found a lot of things in common with me and Jimmy Hoffa. Now, not too many things, let's be clear. But to understand what happened, you almost have to understand kind of what led up to his disappearance. So you have to go all the way back to when he was an 18-year-old stock boy working at Kroger's grocery.
Wow.
Right? In fact, actually, you have to go back before that, because what not a lot of people know is that he was actually the son of a coal miner in Indiana. He was born in Brazil, Indiana, not Brazil,
right.
Brazil, Indiana.
Yeah.
He was the son of a coal miner, and his father died of black lung. He literally worked to death.
Wow.
While Hoffa was a young boy, leaving Hoffa and his brother and his mother. So his mother started doing laundry for everybody in the neighborhood, trying to make ends meet. She was determined to keep the family afloat. She was a very hard-edged woman. She moved the family from Indiana to Michigan, where little Jimmy Hoffa realized that he had to work to help his mother keep the family afloat. So him and his brother would shine shoes, they would deliver the clean laundry, they would do everything they could to help their mother, and eventually, about 18 years old, Jimmy Hoffa starts working on the docks of the Kroger, unloading the trucks. And what he realized at a very young age was that when there was no truck to unload, they sat around. Nobody was getting paid, nobody was making money, nothing was happening. They just sat there. It was a complete waste of time. Now, Jimmy Hoffa, being so young and impressionable when his father died of black lung, and then right after that was hit by the Depression, he was very focused on not living that life and not wanting others to have to go through the struggles that he went through, moving from Indiana to Michigan, being a shorter guy. That's where I really associate. He was a short guy who had to fight through very tough neighborhoods. When you're a littler guy, I know there's a whole Napoleon complex thing.
Right.
That's another story for another episode because that's all bullshit. But as littler guys, you do have to fight twice as hard. So Hoffa took that ideology with him. As an 18-year-old, he organized all the truck unloaders for Kroger's, all of his fellow stock boys, and stock men really at that point. And they all went to management and said, unless they got paid a fair, even wage, even when they weren't, they were going to strike. Eventually striking and getting his way. They let Jimmy Hoffa, again, 18, 19 years old, in there to negotiate the terms when they eventually got a contract and were successful. From there, he continued to do that. Many other companies and corporations, many other groups of laborers would come together and actually ask him to negotiate. His whole negotiating philosophy was he'd go in and he would say,
so they basically made this young kid who's barely 19 years old do all this major negotiation.
Yeah, and he dropped out of high school in 9th grade. So we're not talking about somebody that had a great education when it came to your normal book stuff, but he's very street smart. He was a very bright individual, and he took advantage of every opportunity he could get. He realized that he could get into a room with management, and they were softer than him. So he could sit there and out-stamina them. And once they got too tired, that's when he got his way, because he would literally wear them down. He was one of the most dedicated human beings to a cause ever. The man never smoked, never drank, never womanized. Never went on vacation. He worked 7 days a week. Never played a round of golf in his life. He lived and died for the Teamsters. So as you progress through his life, he's moving up the ranks of Teamsters and unions and negotiating these things. But then he starts to realize he'd go out on a picket line, get in a fight, because back then what would happen is management, they weren't going to fight you.
Right.
But they would hire mafia and mob men, and those men would beat up on the striking laborers. So Jimmy Hoffa realized that the best way for him to combat that was to have mobsters of his own, or know the mobsters on the other side and utilize those relationships. So that's exactly what he did. He got in contact and got very comfortable with mafia and mob affiliated people. And what he did was he utilized those powers, kind of zapping it from the management and allowing him better techniques for negotiation. And he was able to use their muscle to push himself up through the ranks of the Teamsters very, very fast. Very fast.
Right.
Eventually, he became the president of the Teamsters International. Again, he lived and died for the Teamsters. What not a lot of people know is he was a super dedicated father, and this comes back into play later on in the story. He was an unbelievably dedicated father. He loved his wife. He loved his children very, very much.
So let me ask
But he
you.
was very dedicated.
Let me ask you this, Jay. So you got this guy who's super dedicated to his family, right? He's not a drinker. He's not a womanizer. He's not doing drugs. He's a straight-laced dude. But he is hiring.
I don't know if I go straight-laced, but yeah.
What? Somewhat, besides the hiring the mob part of it. Yeah. All accounts, a pretty straight-up dude, right? Where did this all go wrong? Tell me where all this went wrong, Jay.
So all this starts to go wrong. Well, things start to unravel, really, as he becomes the president of the Teamsters Union International. Because now he has accessibility to the pension of 400,000 plus truck drivers. At that time, he actually had more members in his Teamsters Union than the United States had in the Army.
Wow, that's impressive.
Wrap your mind around that.
Yeah,
and
that's impressive.
Because it was because the Teamsters were an international union, he actually didn't have to answer to anybody. He didn't have to answer to the president. He didn't have to answer to senators. He didn't have to answer to anybody.
Wow.
He was top dog. And if he called a strike, every truck in America that really keeps the backbone of this country running would have stopped.
That's just like having, he had basically a stranglehold then.
He had a stranglehold. But remember, he used the mafia to get into power. So what the mafia wanted to do is the mafia would skim money away from the pensions. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars he had access to. So they used him and those pensions as their bank. And actually, they used those pensions to fund the building of Las Vegas.
Wow. Amazing. I didn't know that they used that.
It's incredible. Jimmy Hoffa was huge in getting Vegas built and going because he loaned the mafia those dollars. Now, here's where the things get interesting, because the mafia had enough respect for Jimmy Hoffa to allow him, they would pay back those pension money. So he only gave them money that he felt were good investments. They were more partners.
Right.
Okay? And Jimmy Hoffa was a very headstrong individual. He was a very tough guy. He ends up getting in contact with a mafia hitman by the name of Frank. It starts with an S, and now I'm getting a little hazy on it. Frank. He calls him and he says to him, "I hear you paint houses." And there's actually a book by that title that documents this guy's life. And when someone says, "I hear you paint houses," that means that you kill people because your blood splatters what's up on the wall, and that you're painting the wall with blood. And he responded, "Yes, I do my own construction," which means he would also get rid of the bodies. So there's a chance, and they've never been able to link Hoffa to anybody's murders, but there's a chance that he called him knowing that somebody might have to be off. Now, this guy would eventually become the head of his own Teamsters union on the East Coast. So he ran the East Coast Teamsters collection and was like Hoffa's right-hand guy.
Wow.
Him and Hoffa were very close. They traveled together all the time.
Right.
So Hoffa's loaning the Mafia money. The Mafia is paying it back. The Teamsters are none the wiser. Hoffa's taking a little on the side. Everybody's good. Everybody's happy. Until the early 60s. Until the early 60s. In the early 60s, Jimmy Hoffa runs into Robert Kennedy.
Really?
Robert Kennedy felt he had to prove his position because before Robert Kennedy became the Attorney General, he had never tried a case, ever. He got that because of his family's clout. So he really went after Jimmy Hoffa. And there's some really interesting conversations. These are two people that fought a class war by themselves. Jimmy Hoffa hated Robert Kennedy, and the feeling was reciprocated.
Oh, wow.
These two went at each other. And if anybody ever gets a chance, I suggest you go on YouTube and watch some of the footage of Robert Kennedy, like, going at Jimmy Hoffa, and Jimmy Hoffa defending, going at him back, especially when he starts talking about having communists in the ranks of the Teamsters. Holy shit, does Jimmy Hoffa go off.
Oh,
and
probably gangster,
it
huh?
shows, yeah, man. I mean, it shows you just how tough Jimmy Hoffa had to be. Again, here's a guy with a ninth grade level education, sitting in a grand jury, being deposed by the brother of a then senator, eventual president, on trial for really all intents and purposes, on trial. He's up there and he is being sequestered. He is being just run through, and he doesn't back down one little bit. In fact, he gives Robert Kennedy every bit that Robert Kennedy gave him back. I mean, that really shows you the kind of fortitude and confidence that this dude had, and it's why he was such a great leader. Everywhere he went, everything he did, everybody would end up following and kind of looking to him as a leader because he was so charismatic and strong-willed, and he really did seem to have everybody's best interest at heart. Where it gets sad is because he allowed his moral compass to come askew to get the power to make things right. So again, it's kind of like we talked earlier. You have to decide on, is the cost worth the outcome?
Right.
So this is where things start going down for Hoffa. Hoffa is being under the microscope of JFK and Robert Kennedy to the point where everything he does is being tracked. Eventually, one of the Teamsters kind of throws Hoffa under the bus. So then Hoffa ends up on trial for fraud, for embezzling, for a few other charges. Eventually, the case gets thrown out because the jury couldn't make a decision. Well, then he goes back on trial for jury tampering.
Oh, great.
Now, this is where they got him. They got him on the jury tampering. They were able to prove that he had somebody mess with the jury, and that is how he got out of his initial legal battle. So once he's found to that, then the dominoes start falling.
Right.
He ends up getting 13 years in prison. So as he's leaving the Teamsters, he leaves it to his second in command, not Frankie that we talked about earlier. He leaves it to his second in command, who's not as strong-willed.
Okay.
So the 4 years ultimately Hoffa would end up in prison. And while he was in prison, just to talk about how charismatic he was, he organized a union for the officers of the prison, for corrections officers. He helped organize a union for the corrections officers, and he played the go-between between the officers and the warden, and was able to get the officers what they needed.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, man. That's
impressive.
That's impressive. That's balls.
That's impressive. I take nothing away from this guy. The guy made some mistakes. I'm not going to say far from perfect. He was a dedicated father. He was a hell of a worker, and he always put the Teamsters first. So the 4 years he was in prison, the person he had left to take his position as the president of the Teamsters International he wasn't as strong as Jimmy Hoffa was. So he allowed the mafia to do whatever they wanted. Now, here's where things can start getting a little bit muddled up, because while he was in prison, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
The person that assassinated John F. Kennedy, help me out here. I'm drawing a blank on
Which one?
I'm having a lot of trouble with names.
Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yeah, Harvey Oswald.
Okay.
Now, this is where things start getting muddled. And this is where the mysteries really start with what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. Because the person that murdered Lee Harvey Oswald had ties to the same mafia that Hoffa was in cahoots with. There's a conspiracy theory out there that the same gang, the same mob that was in cahoots with the killer of Lee Harvey Oswald were also in talks with the CIA trying to overthrow Castro.
Yep. I've heard that same thing.
So the government might be partially responsible. The mafia might be partially responsible. There's some talks about him still being, or him faking his death, but I don't believe that. Only because he was such a dedicated family man. I don't think he would just disappear. He's too head fast, too stubborn.
Yeah.
So anyway, Hoffa spends 4 years in prison, and the only reason he gets out is because President Nixon pardons him. And the only reason the pardon worked is because he pardoned him saying that he could no longer go back to working with the Teamsters. So Jimmy Hoffa, not realizing that was wording in the pardon, takes the pardon, signs the pardon, gets out, realizes that that's in the pardon, and he's not allowed to actually interact with the Teamsters ever again. But he feels like that's not really how that should be. So what does he do?
He goes
Hoffa
back.
then starts talking about, he starts trying to appeal the portion of the pardon that says he couldn't work for the Teamsters again. And a lot of the Teamsters wanted him back as their president because while he was the president, even though there was some embezzling going on, they never made more. Jimmy Hoffa got them the maximum wages and always took care of them first. He was their guy. And they, 98%, were loyal to him. So he wanted to be back in position. But the Mafia didn't want him back in position because if he had gotten back in position, the Mafia couldn't do what they wanted with the Teamsters' pensions like they wanted. They couldn't take money and not have to pay it back. That would be why there's like $150 million missing from those pension funds. Because they didn't feel like they had to pay it back to the other guy.
Right, of course.
Hoffa, they would have.
Right.
So, in Hoffa's desperate, frantic, almost addict style, he's like addicted to being the head of the Teamsters. Like he had to do it. He threatened to denounce the Mafia, and he starts getting ready to turn on them. Now, what he would have told about the mobsters and the Mafia, who knows? That went with Jimmy Hoffa to his grave.
Right.
Presumably.
Well, that's another interesting
Hoffa's having
point,
issues.
where his grave is. That's a whole other issue, too, right?
Do what?
That's a whole other question in this, a whole monkey wrench into this whole thing. Where is actually his, where does his remains lie at this point?
You'll never find him.
That's true.
So if you look at, and we're talking about just facts, okay, just facts. He had an issue with one particular mob boss. He was set to meet with that mob boss and another mob boss that he'd worked with, try to hash out their issues so he could get back as the head of the Teamsters. But remember, the Mafia doesn't really want him back.
Well.
All of his friends were begging him just to give it up. Let it go. Let it go. So he was supposed to have a meeting with the two. So he goes to a restaurant in Michigan. Now, 2 days before, he was actually in Las Vegas in a casino meeting with his lawyer, who was a partner and a part owner of a casino in Las Vegas with this particular mob boss.
Oh, how convenient.
excessively convenient, isn't it? So
I can already see the connection.
this mob boss and Hoffa had a falling out, and Hoffa was trying to fix things because he wanted to get back with the Teamsters. He's supposed to meet for lunch at 2. He calls his wife at 2:15, says the person hadn't shown. He'll be home by 4:30 to grill steaks.
Right.
That's the last anybody ever heard of him.
It's amazing.
Now, his friend, the former hitman who painted houses, has been on record saying that if the mafia are going to hit you, they don't send someone you don't know.
Right.
They send someone you know to lull you with a false sense of security. And that's the leading thought on what probably happened to Jimmy Hoffa. He probably got in a car with someone he thought he knew, talking about the most recent football game, and before he knew it, pow, he was dead.
Yeah. Oof.
And with all those industrial parks out in Detroit, especially under mafia control back in the 60s or 70s at this point,
Right.
it wouldn't have been very hard to put his body somewhere that it's never going to be found.
Yeah, you're right, and it's like an ongoing mystery. Where is Jimmy Hoffa's remains? Nobody knows. You know,
Where's Hoffa's remains? So the big conspiracies are, some people think that the CIA did it, knowing that he was going to expose the possibility that they were the ones that assassinated Robert and John Kennedy. There's talk that the Teamsters might have done it because some of the Teamsters were pissed that he allowed the mafia to skim off the top of their pensions. And then there's the obvious mafia connection. Now, I think we know where my belief is on what happened.
where do you lie?
You could say...
Where do you think, Jay? Tell me.
I mean, honestly, I think the mafia, they were enjoying the power they were having over a much weaker president than Jimmy Hoffa. They didn't want Hoffa back in the presidency because he was a strong enough leader to where he would tell the mafia, no, you can't have this money. It's a bad investment. Or they felt enough respect for him that they had to give those monies back. And money will make men do crazy things.
Oh yeah, we've seen that time and time again.
Money and pussy. Those are the two things that make men do dumb things. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right. You're right. But yeah, it's an interesting thing because, you know, there's the legend where he's buried. What is it, under supposedly like Giant Stadium? Is that correct or no?
Supposedly he's buried somewhere under the AstroTurf and Giant Stadium. There was talks of him being put and stuffed in a refrigerated truck and thrown off the coast of Alaska. There's so many different places in Detroit. They talk about the possibility he's under the concrete, but nothing has ever turned up, and nothing will ever turn up.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's ever going to be a time where his body's going to show up. I think they've gotten rid of it in such a way where you're never going to find it. So, and the mafia has proven themselves time and time again that they are experts in that particular field. So, yeah, that's a great case, man. It's something that they've made movies of, and it's a great story. And you know, it's interesting how a guy of that nature who didn't have much education just pretty much did things with his word and what he was able to do, and make things happen and negotiate with for people. And that's a pretty impressive thing, especially for that time and how far he was able to get up in the ranks. For somebody who didn't have the basic tools to do it, he certainly was able to make up with it. I guess with his personality and his street smarts, it seems like.
His charisma, his work ethic, and his determination.
Yeah.
And those are three super admirable character traits that I found in Jimmy Hoffa as I listened to documentaries and I read different articles written about him. As I kind of delved more into the life of Jimmy Hoffa, he was like I said, a complex man. He was a very interesting individual. He was a dedicated father to his two kids, to his granddaughter. He was an all-out family man. The only thing that came above his family was the Teamsters. He felt like the Teamsters was his family, but it was also his responsibility to never see somebody go through what he went through after his father passed with no pension, no benefits, and he did everything he could, including getting in bed with the mafia, to make sure that his Teamsters never had to go through that. So, again, his decision to get in bed with them obviously came back to bite him in the ass.
Yeah, it sure did.
But ultimately, his reasoning was sound. Where his heart lied was in the right place. He just got aside the path, which is a shame. Because honestly, if you take someone like Jimmy Hoffa and you get him somewhere in government, as a senator or a governor, or hell, even a president, could you imagine the things that charismatic, strong-willed leader could have accomplished?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Imagine a guy like that. I mean, a guy who was able to make, something out of himself when he had nothing, and to be able to do that, put him in a position of power. I mean, my gosh, who knows what could have happened?
Exactly. So that was my true crime mystery, because obviously nobody's ever found the body. Nobody's really ever talked about it. There have been a few people come out and said that they killed Hoffa, but they couldn't really complete the story as to what they did or how it all went down. So, there's still a lot of different conspiracy theories around what happened, where he's at. And it's a mystery that's probably going to be unsolved until the end of the planet, until the end of the human race. But again, I strongly, strongly advise, if you guys are looking for something really invigorating to watch, something really stupendously entertaining, YouTube the Robert Kennedy, Jimmy Hoffa debate, because they are incredible.
I never saw those. I'm going to have to check those out.
You would like them, my friend. You would like them very much so.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. Okay, man. Well, listen, that's a great one, man. Thanks for doing the research on that, and you really, got into it and was able, were able to really get into that case and, give some really good details on it. And, I agree with you. I think the mafia had something to do with it. That's what it seems like it all points to at the end. But nonetheless, one of the great mysteries of, American culture, to this day, where's Jimmy Hoffa? Where's his body, and who killed him, and how was it all done? We'll never know, I guess. So one of the greatest, American mysteries that will continue to remain, because like you said, Jay, I don't think they're ever going to find his body. So interesting case. Tonight, Jay, I want to bring out a classic here from Florida. And when I talk about this particular case, you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about, and because you living here in Florida, that's all you could hear about during that time. But I'm going to talk about the Caylee Marie Anthony case. Very sad case. Yeah, right out of Orlando, Florida, and it was a very interesting time that was happening here in Florida, because in 2008, 2009. All the way to 2011, when the trial finally concluded. It was a very interesting case. And for those of you that don't know, Caylee Marie Anthony, she was a 3-year-old American girl. She lived in Orlando, Florida. Her mother, Caylee Marie Anthony, I think she was like 19 or 20 at the time. She lived there with her grandparents, George and Cynthia Anthony. And she was reported missing on July 15th of 2008, made by a 911 call by Cindy, the grandmother, and who said that she had not seen Caylee for 31 days. So that's what kind of like got the whole ball in motion, and that's what started everything, because the grandmother hadn't seen Caylee in a while, and grew very suspicious about what was happening. So how did it all happen? The disappearance of Caylee. According to Casey Anthony's father, George Anthony, Casey left the family's home on June 16, 2008. Then she took her daughter Caylee, who was almost 3 years old at the time, with her, and did not return for 31 days. Casey's mother, Cindy, asked repeatedly during the month to see Caylee, but of course Casey claimed that she was too busy with work assignment in Tampa, and other times she said that Caylee was with a nanny. Do you remember that part, Jay? The nanny who supposedly took Caylee away as well, and she blamed this poor Spanish lady who had nothing to do with anything. And next thing you know, this poor nanny is on national television as a suspect in this girl's disappearance. But going back to the case here, the nanny who was named Zenaida or Zanny supposedly took her to a theme park and then a beach, and then supposedly eventually determined that the woman Zenaida didn't in fact exist, but she had never met Casey or Caylee or any other member of the Anthony family. So this lady who's never even met her had just got pinned for this girl's disappearance. Well, anyways, on July 13th, 2008, while doing yard work, Cindy and George Anthony found a notice from the post office for a certified letter affixed to their front door. George then picked up the certified letter from the post office and found that his daughter's car was in the tow yard. And so then George picked up the car, and both he and the tow yard attendant noted a strong smell coming from the trunk. So both later stated that they believed the odor that of a decomposing body. That's what they said that they felt like what it was. When the trunk was opened, it contained a bag of trash, but no human remains. Cindy then reported Caylee missing that day, on July 15th, to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. And then during that same telephone call, Casey confirmed to the 911 operator that Caylee had been missing for 31 days, sounding very distraught over the phone. And then Cindy also said, and this is a very important part of the case here, Jay, that there was something wrong. This is the quote. "There is something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car." That was the quote, Jay. So the day that this girl ended up missing, or the day that she was reported missing, her grandmother reports this to the cops on 911. So at this point, a lot of the evidence points to Casey, right? So now we get into the investigation.
I mean, 31 days with the kid, listen, we're both parents. If my kid's gone for 31 minutes and I don't know where they are, I'm feeling like the worst human being ever, and I freak the fuck out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a fear of any parent, or any sane parent, I should say, is, something.
There you go. You got to put that pretense in there.
Exactly. Any sane parent. And, I don't believe that we were dealing with a very sane parent here, but, getting into the investigation, the guy who was in charge of the whole investigation was Detective Yuri Melik of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. He was the one who began investigating Caylee's disappearance, and he found a bunch of discrepancies in Caylee's signed statements. It was full of holes, basically, Jay. When he questioned her, she said that Caylee had been kidnapped by Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, the nanny again, who she identified as Zanny. And so she had talked about this Zanny lady continuously through the interview, but she had never mentioned it to Casey's family or friends. When they questioned her about, questioned them about this nanny person, nobody knew who the fuck this lady was, Jay. So it was like this girl who, pulled this lady into this fray of this craziness out of nowhere, just to get I believe, in my opinion, the heat off of her. So she said that she was working at Universal Studios at the time, a lie that she had been telling her parents for years, and so that was another hole in the case. Then she said that she brought Caylee to Universal Studios that same day that she was reported missing, and she led the police around a while before admitting that she had been fired years before. So then she copped to the whole bullshit. She came out, she's like, okay, I lied, blah, 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 blah. So already from the beginning, Jay, we're dealing with an individual who is already lying about working at a certain place. Why would you lie about something like that? If you're going to lie about something like that, how could you be credible on anything else, right?
You can't be. But of course, you're trying to throw logic into someone who has done something illogical. So she's trying to scratch and claw and find every which way she could to get the attention off of her, come up with some kind of alibi that makes enough sense. The lying about working at Universal, especially to, helps the parents help her, I guess. It's convoluted to say the best.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so Casey was arrested on July 16th, 2008, and she was charged with the following day with giving false statements to a law enforcement officer, child neglect, and obstruction of criminal investigation. So the judge denied bail, saying that Casey had shown woeful disregard. This is the quote: "woeful disregard for the welfare of her child." That's already a judge already coming out saying that. That that should give so much weight to this case. But as we get in a little further, we'll see what the overall sentencing was, which was laughable at best. But we'll get into the investigation here going back. Let's see here. So she was charged with all these charges. Judge denied bail. She had no regard for her child. And then after a bond hearing, the judge set bail at $500,000. And so on August 21st, 2008, after a 1 month incarceration, she was released from the Orange County Jail after her $500,000 bail was posted by the nephew of California bail bondsman Leonard Padilla in hopes that she would cooperate and Caylee would be found. So on August 11th, 12th, and 13th of that year of 2008, meter reader Roy Cronk called police about a suspicious object found in the forested area near Anthony's residence. The first instance, he was directed by the sheriff's office to call the tip line, which he did, receiving no call, no return call at all whatsoever. On the second instance, he again called the sheriff's office, eventually was met by 2 police officers and reported them that he had seen what appeared to be a skull near a gray bag. On that occasion, the officer conducted a short search, and he stated that he did not see anything. But on December 11th of 2008, Cronk again called the police. They searched and found the remains of a child in a trash bag. Now, the investigative teams recovered duct tape, which was hanging from Caylee's hair, and some soft tissue that was left in her skull. And then after the next 4 days, Jay, more bones were found, scattered in the woods. Obviously, the animals got to the body at some point, and just, that's what happens in nature, unfortunately. And then the death was ruled a homicide at that point because of all that not circumstantial, but all that evidence that pretty much pointed to something nefarious was happening at that point. So that was how it all kind of came to be. And when the body was found, then Casey was offered a limited immunity deal on July 29th of 2008 by prosecutors related to the false statements given to the law enforcement about locating her child stuff, which was renewed on August 25th. Which she did not take. So she denied. She just basically said, "No, I'm not gonna take that deal." So then on September 5th of that same year, 2008, she was released again on bail, all pending charges from being fitted for the electronic tracking device. So she had an ankle monitor and all that shit. And then her $500,000 bond was posted by her parents, George and Cindy Anthony. So they signed a promissory note for the bond, and they basically got her out. So on October 14th, Casey Anthony was indicted by the grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to police. She was later arrested again, and then Judge John Jordan ordered that she be held without bond, no bond at all whatsoever. So on October 21st, 2008, the charges of child neglect were dropped against Casey, according to the state attorney's office, because, quote-unquote, the evidence proved that the child was deceased. The state sought an indictment on the legally appropriate charges, and that's the end of the quote. So on October 28th, Anthony was arraigned and pleaded not guilty to all charges. And then on April 13th of that 2009, prosecutors announced that they planned to seek the death penalty in the case. So now the case is developing more. Things are really starting to, the pressure is getting to Casey. Do you remember when all this stuff was happening, Jay, that there was actually men sending her letters to her saying they were in love with her and all this stuff?
Yeah, because dudes are dumb.
But you know what? It actually happens on the other side too. Charlie Manson. He had a bunch of admirers, and a lot of these serial killers. They have these people who just fall in love with them for some reason.
Crazy as shit. Crazy. Here I am, 39, single as could be. Charlie Manson and Miss Anthony, they're pulling more trim than they know what to do with. It's unfair, Will.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So let's see. She was indicted on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, all that stuff. Cronk, who discovered the remains, repeated the same basic story that he had told the police on Friday, October 24, 2008. A forensic report by this guy named Arpad Voss of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. He judged that all the results from the air sampling procedure performed of the trunk of Casey Anthony's car showed chemical compounds consistent, this is the quote, Jay, consistent with decompositional event. So basically something died in there. Something died in her trunk. And based on the presence of the 5 chemical key compounds, over 400 possible chemical compounds that Voss research group considers a typical of decomposition. So they were basically able to figure this out, that there was a decomposing body in the trunk at some point. And then on October 2019, officials released 700 pages of documents related to the Anthony investigation, including records of Google searches of the terms neck breaking, quote unquote, how to make chloroform, quote unquote, on a computer accessible to Caylee, and presented by the prosecutors as evidence of a crime. So, according to detectives at that point, a crime scene evidence included a residue of a heart-shaped box sticker that was found on duct tape over the mouth of Caylee's skull. Remember that, Jay, when that came out?
I sure do.
Yeah, that was fucking horrible. However, the actual laboratory test was not able to capture the heart-shaped photographically after some duct tape was subject to dye testing. So I guess when they did the testing of the tape, they kind of ruined the heart-shaped sticker. So another thing that they found at the scene was a blanket that matched Caylee's bedding at her grandparents' home. So there was a connection there as well. Among the photos that were entered into evidence, Jay, one of the computer of Ricardo Morales, an ex-boyfriend of Caylee, depicting a poster with the caption "Win her over with chloroform." So that was like this ongoing thing that Caylee had, like some obsession with chloroform. It's really strange. So witness John Dennis Bradley's software developed for computer investigations was used by the prosecution to indicate that Caylee had conducted extensive computer searches on the word chloroform, 84 times to be exact, Jay. And it suggested that she had planned to commit this murder. I mean, it was pretty simple. He later then discovered that there was a flaw in the software and misread the forensic data, and the word chloroform had been searched only one time, and in the website in question offered information on the use of chloroform in the 19th century. So it kind of backfired. They figured out that the algorithm wasn't working, and basically they couldn't use that evidence. So, well, she looked it up at least one time. So, is it circumstantial evidence that she looked at the word chloroform, and maybe if there was chloroform used, who knows? That's something that you have to kind of, think about. But the attorneys and the jury led the prosecutor in the case was Assistant State Attorney Linda Burdick. She was the lead prosecutor on the team. With on the other side was the defense was Jose Baez. Everybody was very familiar with Mr. Jose Baez. He was you remember that guy, right? He's very loud, very flamboyant, very boisterous. He came across as a dick, pretty much, on TV. The jury selection took longer than expected. It was kind of really an issue because this was a really serious case. I mean, they had to get a jury from another area to look at this case because it impacted a lot of people. It impacted the whole state of Florida. I mean, everybody was watching this case, basically waiting to see what was going to happen. And, it had everybody on pins and needles. But panel consisted of 9 women, 8 men. The trial took 6 weeks. During the time, the jury was sequestered to avoid any influence from, information that was available outside the courtroom. So, you had this crazy case just building up, and, all this, the circus show that goes behind this. People don't realize, this is not like a normal case where, you just go into a courtroom and that's it. And, no, this is like cameras are following you all the time. There's investigators that are trying to figure out, who you are, if you're on, the jury, and, find out about your life and so on and so forth. So it's crazy to think about all the other things that go into it as well. You know what I mean? That go into this case. So getting into the case again, as the juries and all that stuff starts to ramp up, they have the case. A lot of the stuff that comes out in the case, Jay, they start pointing to the the grandfather. They start pointing that there was some type of abuse that he had done to Caylee when she was younger. That he may have been responsible for Caylee's death. They believe that she supposedly died by drowning, supposedly, in a pool at the house, and that he was the one who just dispose of the body. A lot of that was kind of picked apart during the jury trial, and a lot of people figured out that that was kind of bullshit, that this girl seemed very crazy and just was unstable, because you could tell by what she was doing supposedly the day after Caylee was dead or gone. She was out partying. She was out posting pictures of herself on Facebook, going to, drinking parties and doing keg stands and hanging out with guys and doing all this crazy shit. Meanwhile, her daughter is dead. So you can already tell what kind of person you're dealing with at that point by looking at what actions they were doing at that point when all this was going on. She was not like
I believe piece of shit comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great word, a depiction, exactly. So she was doing all this stuff, and even after, she was really placating to her being like this innocent looking person. She was a fairly attractive woman, yes, but I think she used that to her advantage. I think she was able to kind of, sway people, because the end result was that she was found not guilty for the murder of her daughter. I think, in my personal opinion, the prosecution really dropped the ball in this case, because I believe that this is my personal opinion. I don't know about you, Jay, but besides the O.J. Simpson case where everybody knew he did it, but he got away with it, this is another case where everybody knew she did it, but she got away with it.
Yeah, it's a shame the justice system fails us like this, and especially in such a high-profile case. You really hope that people are crossing their T's and dotting their I's. But in this case, I don't think the lawyers did the job that they had to do, and she was getting to kind of walk out scot-free.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's amazing that the justice system failed us in this particular case, and that's what I really do believe happened here. She had a hell of a lawyer. I give it up to Mr. Baez. He did a great job doing what he was supposed to do for his client. That's what he's paid for, and that's his job. So I can't take that away from him, even though he's a dick. But she got away with this, and it's amazing to me that, well, she did get pinned for the lying to the cops. So that was pretty much, she fessed up to that, so you couldn't get around that. So she ended up, I think, spending a year in jail. I think it was already time served because she had been in jail already for that long. So, pretty much she was released at that point, and she's allowed to live, a free life to this point. And I don't know if you know this, Jay, but she lives not too far from us, actually in the next town over in Lake Worth.
I did not realize that she lives in Lake Worth. I'll have to keep an eye out next time I'm down there. Listen, she was acquitted. She got off. She got away with it. There's nothing we can do about it at this point. It's a shame that the justice system failed, but I guess she's found not guilty. Kind of let her go. I really feel bad about saying that. No, she shouldn't be let go. But
right,
there's nothing we can do outside law. So
let me ask you this, Jay.
I'm not condoning anything outside the law. People, listen to me very clearly. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Let me ask you a question, Jay. Since you're a single man,
yeah, man,
and you were hooked up on a blind date, and next thing you know, it's Caylee Anthony, would you continue on that date? I'm curious.
Oh, hell no. You got the crazy eyes, bro.
She does. She has psycho eyes. Psycho eyes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm out.
Yeah. She's like one of those women that is like in your windowsill, like looking through, peeping through, trying to see what's going on.
Like that meme, one of the initial memes,
yeah.
I went through your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Who's this woman you're texting named Mom?
No, it's an interesting question because I've always wanted to know who would date somebody like that. Maybe it's been so long. It's been 10 years already, Jay, actually, since that all happened. I mean, it seems like yesterday, but it's been 10 years, and it's crazy.
I'm sure there's people. I'm sure there's plenty of people. I'm sure there's plenty of dudes that have found themselves out on a date with Caylee Anthony and were like, hey, she's kind of hot.
Oh boy, I have no idea. Well, yeah, listen, that was my case for the true crime segment for this podcast, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed Jimmy Hoffa. Hope you guys enjoyed Caylee Anthony, another case where we're never going to find out. And I don't believe that, who killed her, but we kind of already know who did in a way. So, but we don't know 100%, of course. But, again, great stories, two great true crime stories where, again, it'll be something that we always talk about. It'll be a mystery to us, and, we can always talk about. Again, that's it for the meat and potatoes of the podcast, Jay. Let's round it out with what to watch for this week. Jay, what do you got for what to watch? Tell us.
For me, my what to watch, I've actually been going back. I have two what to watch. Okay. I've recently been going back and watching episodes of the live version of The Tick.
Remember that? Yeah,
The Tick.
The Tick, the blue guy.
The Tick?
Yeah.
Paul Warburton's character was taken from the animated series and put into a live action series. And yeah, the special effects aren't great, and the storylines are kind of doofy, but it's good for a good dumb watch. If you're not really sure what to do, or if you need something kind of dumb that you don't really need to follow that's kind of cutesy. What I always liked about the live action version of The Tick is it really focuses more on Arthur or the moth than it does on the Tick.
Oh, that's interesting.
I find that to be interesting. It's almost like you have the weird world of the Tick surrounding this one person that's like the central point. Even though he's not the main character or the character the show is named after, the moth is really the main focus of the show because he's the one that you can most easily associate yourself with as having these superheroes and supervillains that all seem to really, really be stupid. Arthur kind of has this like common sense about him where it's just like a lot of times you just see in his face, he's like, "The fuck are you talking about?" So that's a great show. I suggest everybody go back and watch it. It's entertaining to say the least. And if I haven't already used it as my what to watch, go see Captain Marvel. It is a great movie, and it's going to send up Endgame very nicely, and the Endgame will be coming out I want to say it's in like 2 weeks. So everybody should be ready for that. I will be going to see it as soon as it comes out, and that Captain Marvel leads into that. So Captain Marvel was a great movie. I actually went and saw it twice in the movie theaters, which I almost never do.
Yeah, it was a lot better than what I expected it to be, actually. I didn't have high expectations for it, and I was pleasantly surprised.
I think in the comic books, especially if you're not as in-depth with the comic books, Captain Marvel kind of tends to slip through your fingers, mostly because she was a member of the Avengers and definitely big with the original Infinity Wars. Really, especially in the MCU, she hasn't played as big a part, which means she hasn't been reached out to the masses the way a Captain America or a Hawkeye or a Vision have. She was always kind of more of an ancillary character. And it might almost be because she's got the Superman complex,
right?
Where she's just too powerful.
Right.
It's hard to find or put her in a position where she's not going to be the most powerful being in the room. So she ends up not getting as much notice or as much attention because we can't identify with her as much. But I thought the movie was fantastic.
Yeah, they did a really good job. They really did. And like I said, a lot better than what I was expecting. And it really did, turn my head. I was like, okay. I really did enjoy that. So, yeah, that I agree with you on that.
It was a great movie, and I suggest everybody goes and sees it, right? Especially since Endgame is going to come out soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, listen, thanks for that what to watch this week, Jay. And again, just wanted to remind everybody where to listen to the podcast. Listen to us anywhere. And I do mean anywhere. What I mean by anywhere is I mean, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. You can find us. Just look up Dark Fringe Radio. That's all you got to do. When you do that, give a 5-star rating, leave us a comment, do us a favor, throw us a bone. We really appreciate it. It helps us out with the podcast, and it gets us up in the ranks, helps us with the marketers, and helps us put a couple bucks in our pocket as well. So again, follow us on all our social media: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Follow us there, Dark Fringe Radio. Follow all our stuff. Make sure you comment there as well. Interact with me. I'm always on there. Again, I'm Will Martinez for Jay Colosi. Jay, anything else for the outro?
Yeah, if you're going to do something, make sure it's worth the price you have to pay. to get what you're looking for. Don't overextend yourselves. Keep that moral compass pointing north. Be good, be safe, and please, if you end up on a date with Caylee Anthony, go the other way.
Yes, run the other way. Absolutely. Again, I'm Will Martinez for my co-host. As always, Jay Galosi. We bid you farewell, good night, and we'll see you next week.
Deuces.
Thank you for listening to Dark Fringe Radio, recorded in the Mephistopheles Studios. Any correspondence can be sent to thedarkfringe@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening.
Look into the eyes and you start with the end of the world. I would never do love, but I would call it big. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution of love. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. It's a precious baby, it's a precious baby. That's what you are. Next time you say don't talk, I say you talk. Because no one selects my life. I need to compromise my life. And I say that you always are. But that's sad. Because can't express myself, can't express myself. Because can't express myself, can't